My golden child brother always got everything. When Dad died, the will revealed I was getting the last laugh. Growing up, I was the invisible daughter in a house where my younger brother could do no wrong. Every achievement of mine was overshadowed by his smallest accomplishment. Every mistake I made was magnified while his were brushed under the rug. My parents, especially my dad, had this way of making me feel like I was just taking up space while my brother was the shining star of the family. It started early. When I brought home straight A's in elementary school, Dad would glance at my report card and say something like, "Good job," without looking up from his newspaper. But when my brother brought home B's and C's, suddenly it was celebration time. Dad would take him out for ice cream and tell everyone how proud he was. I remember sitting at the kitchen table watching them leave together, wondering what I had to do to get that same excitement from my father. The pattern continued through middle school and high school. I joined the debate team, made varsity soccer, volunteered at the local animal shelter every weekend. My brother played video games and hung out with friends. Yet somehow his casual interest in basketball for one semester got him a new pair of expensive sneakers and endless praise, while my 3 years of dedication to soccer earned me a pat on the head and the expectation that I'd drive myself to practice. Money was always tight in our house, or at least that's what I was told whenever I asked for anything. When I wanted to go on the senior class trip, my parents said we couldn't afford it. When I needed a graphing calculator for advanced math, I had to save up my babysitting money to buy it myself. But my brother never seemed to face these same financial constraints. He got the latest gaming console for his birthday, new clothes whenever he wanted them, and a car on his 16th birthday. I didn't get a car until I bought my own beat-up Honda with money from my part-time job at the grocery store. College was where the favoritism became truly painful. I had worked my butt off to get a partial scholarship to a decent state school. I was so proud when I got the acceptance letter, thinking finally this would be something that would make my parents, especially Dad, proud of me. Instead, the conversation quickly turned to how we were going to pay for the rest of my tuition. I ended up taking out student loans and working 2 jobs throughout college just to make ends meet. My brother, on the other hand, decided he wanted to go to an expensive private school across the country. He hadn't even applied for scholarships, his grades were mediocre at best, and he had no clear idea what he wanted to study. But Dad didn't hesitate. He took out a second mortgage on the house to pay for my brother's education. When I asked why he had never offered to help me the same way, Dad just said that my brother needed more support because he was finding himself and that I had always been more independent. The independence thing became Dad's go-to excuse for treating us differently. I was independent, so I didn't need help. I was responsible, so I could handle things on my own. My brother was sensitive and needed guidance, so he required more attention and resources. It was like being punished for being capable. The better I got at taking care of myself, the more I was expected to do so without any support. After college, I moved back home temporarily to save money while I looked for a job in my field. It was supposed to be just a few months, but the job market was tough. During those months, I watched my brother come and go as he pleased, leaving messes for me to clean up, eating food I had bought with my own money, and generally treating the house like a hotel. Meanwhile, I was expected to help with household chores, contribute to groceries, and basically act like a live-in housekeeper while my brother was still being treated like a guest. I finally found a job and moved into a tiny apartment across town. It wasn't much, but it was mine. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe without constantly being compared to my brother or made to feel like I was somehow lacking. I started dating someone wonderful, made great friends at work, and slowly began to rebuild my self-esteem. My relationship with my family became strained during this time. I would visit for holidays and family dinners, but the dynamic never changed. My brother would regale everyone with stories of his latest adventures or career moves, and I would sit there listening, contributing when asked, but never really feeling like my own life was of much interest to anyone. Dad would ask me polite questions about work or my apartment, but it always felt perfunctory, like he was checking boxes on a conversation rather than genuinely caring about my answers. The breaking point came during one particularly painful family dinner. My brother had just quit another job, his 3rd in 2 years, and was talking about maybe going back to school for yet another degree. I had just gotten a promotion at work, something I was really excited about, and I mentioned it during a lull in the conversation. Dad nodded and said congratulations, then immediately turned back to my brother and started discussing funding options for his potential return to school. I excused myself to the bathroom and cried, wondering why I kept putting myself through this. After that dinner, I started limiting my visits home. I would come for major holidays but kept them short. I stopped calling as frequently and began building a life that didn't revolve around seeking approval from people who seemed incapable of giving it to me. It was lonely at first, but also liberating. I started to discover who I was when I wasn't constantly trying to measure up to someone else's version of what I should be. Years passed. I got married to someone who saw my worth and celebrated my achievements. We bought a house, traveled, built a life together. My brother continued his pattern of starting and stopping various career paths, always with Dad's financial and emotional support. I heard about it through Mom, who would call me occasionally to fill me in on family news. Dad and I barely spoke directly anymore, which hurt but also felt necessary for my mental health. When I was 32, I got the call that changed everything. Dad had had a massive heart attack at work and died before the paramedics could even get him to the hospital. The shock of losing him so suddenly was overwhelming, but what made it even more complicated was that all the old family dynamics came rushing back during the funeral preparations and the days that followed. Update 1. The funeral was a blur of relatives I hadn't seen in years, casseroles from neighbors, and my brother completely falling apart. I found myself slipping back into my old role of being the responsible one, making phone calls, organizing details, and basically holding everything together while my brother grieved loudly and dramatically. Part of me resented having to be strong again, but part of me was grateful to have something to focus on besides my own complicated feelings about losing Dad. A week after the funeral, we all gathered at the lawyer's office for the reading of the will. I honestly wasn't expecting much. I figured Dad would leave everything to my brother, maybe throw me a small token inheritance, and that would be that. I had made peace with the idea that even in death, my brother would be the favored one. The lawyer was an older man who had known our family for years. He started with the usual legal language, then began reading the specific bequests. To my brother, Dad left his tools, his fishing equipment, and a few $1,000s. I waited for the big reveal, for the announcement that my brother was getting the house, the bulk of the savings, the valuable family heirlooms. Instead, the lawyer looked at me and started reading a completely different set of instructions. To me, Dad left the house, his retirement accounts, his life insurance policy, and the majority of his assets. But that wasn't even the most shocking part. He had also left detailed letters explaining his reasoning, letters that the lawyer was instructed to read aloud. The letter to my brother was short and somewhat cold. It essentially said that Dad hoped he would use this opportunity to finally learn to stand on his own 2 feet and become the man he was capable of being. But the letter to me was completely different. It was pages long and full of things I never knew Dad felt or even noticed. He wrote about how proud he was of my independence and resilience. He talked about specific achievements of mine that I thought he had forgotten or dismissed. He acknowledged that he had failed me as a father by not showing me the support and recognition I deserved. He explained that he had always been harder on me because he knew I was strong enough to handle it, but that he realized too late that strength didn't mean I didn't need love and encouragement. The most devastating part was when he wrote about how he had watched me pull away from the family over the years and how much he regretted the role he had played in that distance. He said he had wanted to reach out and repair our relationship but didn't know how to bridge the gap he had created. The will, he wrote, was his attempt to show me that he had always seen my worth even when he failed to express it. My brother was furious. He started shouting about how unfair it was, how he was the one who had always been there for Dad, how I had abandoned the family and didn't deserve anything. The lawyer calmly explained that the will was ironclad and had been updated just 6 months before Dad's death, so this wasn't some old document that didn't reflect his current wishes. Walking out of that lawyer's office, I felt like I was in a dream. Everything I thought I knew about my relationship with my father had been turned upside down. The brother who had always been the golden child was now claiming that I was the favored one, and honestly, the irony wasn't lost on me. The weeks that followed were incredibly difficult. My brother continued to contest the will even though the lawyer assured me he had no legal grounds to do so. He convinced some relatives that I had somehow manipulated Dad or that the will was fake. Family gatherings became battlegrounds with people taking sides and old grievances being aired. But the most challenging part was processing my own emotions. I felt vindicated, yes, but also incredibly sad. All those years of feeling unloved and unappreciated, and it turned out Dad had been proud of me all along. Why couldn't he have told me when he was alive? Why did I have to learn about his love and respect for me through a legal document read by a stranger? Update 2. 3 months after the will reading, I was still trying to figure out what to do with the house. It was too big for just me and my husband, and it held so many complicated memories. My brother had finally stopped calling me with angry demands and threats, but he also wasn't speaking to me at all. Mom was caught in the middle, trying to maintain relationships with both of us while clearly struggling with her own grief and confusion about Dad's final wishes. That's when I found the box in Dad's closet. I was going through his things, deciding what to keep and what to donate, when I discovered a shoebox hidden behind his winter coats. Inside were dozens of newspaper clippings, photos, and documents related to my achievements over the years. Every academic award, every work promotion, every community service project I had ever done was carefully preserved in that box. There were articles from the local paper about my high school soccer team that I didn't even know had been published. There was a photo of me from my college graduation that I had never seen before, which meant Dad had been there taking pictures even though I thought he was just going through the motions. There were copies of emails I had sent him over the years with updates about my life, emails I thought he had barely read, but he had printed them out and saved them. At the bottom of the box was a journal. Page after page of Dad's handwriting, documenting his thoughts about both his children over the years. Reading it was like getting a window into his mind that I never had when he was alive. He wrote about his fears that he was failing me by not showing me enough affection. He worried that I thought he didn't love me as much as my brother. He documented times when he wanted to tell me how proud he was but didn't know how to express it without seeming like he was picking favorites. The entries about my brother were heartbreaking in a different way. Dad wrote about his concerns that he was enabling him too much, that his constant support was actually hurting him in the long run. He worried that my brother would never learn to be independent if he kept bailing him out. But he also felt trapped by the pattern they had established and didn't know how to change it without seeming cruel. One entry written just a few months before he died really stood out to me. Dad wrote about a conversation he had overheard between me and Mom where I mentioned that I didn't think he was proud of me. He wrote about how much that hurt him and how he realized he had created a situation where his own daughter felt unloved and unappreciated. He made a plan to have a serious conversation with me about our relationship, but he kept putting it off because he didn't know how to start. Reading that journal, I finally understood that Dad's favoritism toward my brother wasn't because he loved him more, but because he was worried about him more. He saw me as capable and strong, someone who would succeed regardless of how much support he gave me. But he saw my brother as fragile and in need of constant propping up. In his mind, he was giving each of us what we needed, but in reality, he was giving my brother what he wanted and me what I could handle. The discovery of the box and journal changed everything for me. I finally had proof that Dad had seen and valued everything I had accomplished. But it also made me incredibly sad because it meant we had both been living with this misunderstanding for years. I had been craving his approval while he thought I didn't need it. He had been proud of me while I thought he was indifferent. I decided to show the journal to my brother. It was a difficult conversation, but I felt like he needed to understand Dad's perspective too. Reading about Dad's concerns regarding his independence was hard for my brother to accept, but it also helped him understand why the will had been written the way it was. We sat in Dad's kitchen, the same place where I had watched him and Dad leave for ice cream all those years ago, and we had the most honest conversation we had ever had. My brother admitted that he had always felt pressure to be the perfect son, even though it seemed like everything came easily to him. He said he knew that Dad worried about him and that the constant support sometimes felt more like a lack of confidence in his abilities than actual love. For the first time, I could see how the golden child treatment had been its own kind of burden. While I had been pushed to be independent, he had been kept dependent. While I had been expected to succeed on my own, he had been given so much help that he never learned to trust his own capabilities. We had both been damaged by Dad's parenting style, just in different ways. Final update. It's been over a year since Dad died, and I'm finally starting to feel like I have some clarity about everything that happened. I decided to keep the house, but I've been renovating it slowly, turning it into a place that feels like home rather than a museum of painful memories. My brother and I have been working on rebuilding our relationship, which has been surprisingly healing for both of us. We started having monthly dinners together, just the two of us, where we talk about our childhood and try to understand each other's perspectives. It turns out we both have a lot of resentment and hurt feelings that we had never really addressed. But we also have a lot of love for each other that got buried under years of competition and comparison. My brother has been working on becoming more independent, and I've been working on letting people help me without feeling like I'm being weak. It's strange how we both ended up with opposite problems that stemmed from the same source. He learned to rely too much on others, and I learned to rely too little. The money from Dad's inheritance has been both a blessing and a burden. On one hand, it's given me financial security that I never had growing up. On the other hand, it's complicated my relationship with my family and forced me to confront a lot of painful truths about my childhood. I've been using some of it to help my brother get back on his feet, but in a way that encourages his independence rather than enabling his dependence. Mom has been struggling with her own grief and guilt about the family dynamics. She's admitted that she went along with Dad's favoritism toward my brother because it was easier than confronting him about it. She's been trying to make amends by being more supportive of me now, but it's hard to change patterns that were established over decades. The most unexpected development has been my relationship with Dad's memory. For so long, I carried anger and resentment toward him for the way he treated me. But reading his journal and understanding his perspective has helped me see him as a flawed human being who was trying to do his best with limited emotional tools. He made mistakes, big ones, but he also loved me in his own complicated way. I still wish he had been able to tell me how he felt while he was alive. I wish we could have had conversations about our relationship and worked through our issues together. But I'm grateful that I finally know the truth about how he saw me, even if it came too late for us to repair our relationship in person. The inheritance was never really about the money or the house or any of the material things. It was Dad's final attempt to communicate with me, to show me that he had seen my worth all along. In a way, it was the conversation we never had, delivered through legal documents and hidden boxes of memories. Looking back, I can see how much energy I spent trying to earn love that was already there but unexpressed. I can see how much pain I caused myself by interpreting Dad's reserve as rejection when it was actually his flawed way of showing confidence in my strength. The golden child treatment that I envied so much was actually Dad's way of expressing his concerns about my brother's capabilities, not his preference for him. These days, I'm focused on building relationships that are based on open communication rather than assumptions and interpretations. I tell people when I'm proud of them. I ask for help when I need it. I try not to let misunderstandings fester the way they did in my family for so many years. The house is almost finished now, and it finally feels like a place where healing can happen rather than a monument to old wounds. My brother comes over regularly, and we're creating new memories to replace the painful ones. We're both learning to be the people we want to be rather than the roles we were assigned in childhood. Dad's been gone for over a year now, but in some ways I feel closer to him than I ever did when he was alive. I understand him better, and I understand myself better because of what I learned from his final gift to me. The inheritance wasn't just money and property, it was the truth about his love for me delivered in the only way he knew how to give it. Sometimes I still feel angry about all the wasted years, all the misunderstandings that could have been avoided if we had just talked to each other honestly. But mostly I feel grateful that I finally know the truth even if it came too late. Love doesn't always look the way we expect it to, and sometimes the people who care about us most are the least able to show it in ways we can recognize. The golden child wasn't really the golden child after all. We were both just kids trying to earn love from a man who didn't know how to express the love he already felt. In the end, we both got what we needed from him, just not in the way any of us expected.